All right, let's dive right in. You know Old Chang Kee, right? The classic Singaporean snack spot? Well, their latest financial report just came out, and honestly, it tells a really fascinating story about a brand we all know and love, grappling with some very real, very modern challenges. So let's get into it.
Okay, so let's just cut straight to the chase. The headline number is this one. Bam, a drop of 19.3%. We're talking about their net profit. Yeah, it's down by nearly a fifth compared to the same time last year. That's a pretty significant number, and it immediately makes you ask, wait, what happened? Because here's the twist in the story. This wasn't because sales just fell off a cliff. Nope. In fact, the amount of money they were bringing in was incredibly stable. So if you're making pretty much the same amount of money, where on earth did all that profit go? That's the big mystery we're going to solve right now.
So, first up, let's dig into this core mystery. Profit down, sales flat. We're going to put those two key numbers, revenue, which is the money coming in, and profit, the money left over, side by side, because they are telling two completely different stories. First, just take a look at their revenue. It's almost perfectly flat. We're talking 51.9 million Singapore dollars in the first half of this fiscal year compared to 51.8 million last year. That's a bump of just 0.2%. For a company this size, that's basically standing still. It tells you people are still buying just as many curry puffs as they always have. But then you look at the profit, and this is where things get dramatic. It fell from $6.2 million all the way down to just $5 million. So let that sink in for a second. The money coming through the door was almost identical, but the money they actually got to keep in their pocket was way, way less. You know, here's a pretty simple way to think about it, and it's something I think we can all relate to. Imagine your paycheck stays exactly the same every single month, but then all of a sudden, your rent goes up, your groceries cost more, your utility bills are higher. You get it. Your income didn't change at all, but you definitely feel a whole lot poorer. That's the exact same squeeze old Chang Kee is feeling right now. So, before we go hunting for those rising bills, let's just spend a quick moment on that stable revenue. Because when you understand why it was flat, it actually makes the drop in profit even more of a head-scratcher. So no big surprises here. The vast majority of their cash, that huge slice of the pie at over 45 million, comes from their outlets. You know, the kiosks you see everywhere. That smaller piece, about 6.5 million, is from other things like deliveries and corporate catering. And both of these areas basically held their ground. But here's the thing. That flat number wasn't because nothing happened. It was actually a real tug of war. On one hand, they did get little boosts from opening some new outlets and saw a nice bump in delivery sales. But all of that was pretty much canceled out by other things, like having to close some shops for renovations and even losing a corporate client. It was like taking 2 steps forward and then 2 steps right back. Okay, time for the next chapter. Feeling the squeeze, the hunt for rising costs. We figured out the money coming in is stable, so it's time to put on our detective hats. The culprit behind that nearly 20% drop in profit has to be on the expense side of the books, so let's go find it. And it really is that simple. The problem here wasn't that people stopped buying old Chang Kee. The problem is that the cost of doing business went way up. It just got a lot more expensive to make and sell those snacks. It's a classic case of what financial folks call margin compression. And trust me, they are not the only ones dealing with this right now. Okay, let's look at Exhibit A. This is selling and distribution costs. This is their biggest expense by far. It covers everything from staff salaries at the kiosks to rent. And it jumped by 4%, from $20.2 million to $21 million. Now, 4% might not sound like a huge number, but that's an extra $800,000 in costs. That's a serious chunk of change. So what's driving this? Well, it's basically a perfect storm of business pressures. First, staff costs went up. That's from regular annual raises plus government policies like the progressive wage model, which pushes up salaries. Then, as they open new outlets and fix up old ones, the accounting costs for that, called depreciation, go up. And on top of it all, even their subcontractors are charging more. The pressure was coming from every direction. And it didn't just stop at the storefronts. Administrative costs, think of this as the cost of running the main office, also went up by 3%. This was driven by all sorts of little things like higher bank fees because more of us are using digital payments, and just the rising cost of repairs and maintenance. See, it's all these little increases that are really starting to add up. And hey, you don't even have to take my word for it. If you want the smoking gun, the company gives it to you right in their report. They said, and I'm quoting here, the group's gross profit margin declined, mainly due to higher food costs and increased production staff expenses. There you have it. Even the most basic costs, the raw ingredients and the people who cook the food, got more expensive. That's inflationary pressure in a nutshell.
So we've found our culprits, a whole bunch of rising costs, from wages to food supplies. But what does this actually mean for the company and its owners, the shareholders? This is where we look at the ultimate bottom line impact. To figure that out, we look at a little metric called earnings per share, or EPS. It sounds technical, but it's super simple. You just take the company's total profit and divide it by the number of shares that exist. It tells you exactly how much profit was generated for each individual share of the company.
And here it is in black and white. This is the real-world result of that profit drop. Last year, earnings per share were $5.12. This year, it's down to $4.14. That is the tangible impact of those rising costs. For every single share of the company someone owns, less profit was made. And that matters because it directly affects the value of the company.
Now, obviously, old Chang Kee is well aware of all this. No company likes to see its profits go down. So the final and maybe the most important part of this story is their plan. What are they going to do to navigate these challenges moving forward?
And this slide really lays out the battlefield perfectly. On the left, you've got the headwinds they know are coming at them. Costs are going to stay high, it's hard to find enough workers, and customers might be spending a little less freely. Then, on the right, you've got their three-part strategy. First, manage costs like a hawk. Second, diversify. Try to get more business-to-business sales. And third, be really smart and strategic about where they expand, targeting busy places like transport hubs.
Which really brings us to the final big question. Old Chang Kee is a classic, a heritage brand, but it is facing some very modern, very tough economic problems. They have a clear plan, and they seem to know exactly what they're up against. But is it going to be enough? Can they manage all these costs and find new ways to grow fast enough to fight back against the squeeze? That's the story we'll all be watching. Thanks for joining this explainer.